Making friends and influencing people is simple if we do this one thing, but so many of us fail in social interactions because we don't know how to connect with people. And this is really important and such a tragedy because so much of our own potential, both in our personal life and business, will be wasted because our success depends on relationships. Personally, I've struggled with making friends and influencing people my entire life, and something unlocked in my brain when I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And this is not a book summary, there are already a ton of those. Instead, this is a discussion about how this book has actually changed my life, so much so that I've made 3 new friends in the last couple of weeks, which would have been really difficult for me about 2 months ago. The change we need to make is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. So are you willing to rework your thinking in order to improve your life, or are you going to continue to miss out on one of the most meaningful things life has to offer? Because from what I've learned, so many of us are so close to success in this area because we're not even doing the wrong things. It's just that we're doing them the wrong way. Let me explain what I mean. I remember when I was in 5th grade and I was getting something from the opposite side of the classroom, like in the cabinets and stuff, and I turned around and I saw the classroom of the students and desks and my friends, or whatever you want to call them, and I was just like watching them, and they were all talking and interacting and connecting, and I literally felt like and thought it feels like there's this glass wall between them and me because none of them even noticed me staring at them. There was no connection at all, and it made me feel like a weirdo and so sad and like, wow, they don't like me, because I was waiting for someone to notice that I was being excluded, but they never did. And I've done that so many times throughout my life until now. Now my approach to social interactions has drastically changed. And the thing that I realized is that I was looking into that room wondering, what is someone gonna do for me? And instead, I should have been asking myself, how can I be someone who other people want to show their best to? Do you see the difference? Because the one thing we need to do to win friends and influence people, and what would benefit us most, both in business and personal life, is to address social interactions with an others first approach. And we'll talk about the 3 key reasons why having an others first mindset and approach is so important. But think about your recent social interactions. I bet that you're actively seeking out clusters of people and going over there to try to join the conversation. You're looking around a room thinking, who can be my friend? What can I say? What can I do? You're trying to do these things and you're trying to talk to people. But the problem is that you're doing it for your benefit instead of others. We have, and I used to have, this idea in my head that like, I want friends, therefore I will talk, or I want to be a part of the conversation. It was me. But the problem is that people can see that. People know that you don't really want to be there for them. All we do when we engage in those conversations is talk about ourselves. Or when we're trying to listen to people, we have glazed over eyes because it's super boring or something. Or we don't even listen when people talk, and the problem with that is, and it's huge, is we can't build on conversations and actually build relationships because we didn't listen last time. So we can't come back the second time to the same person and say, hey, how did it go? Because we never even listened to what they were doing. And then every conversation is shallow because we allow it to be. We don't pay attention. We don't put in the work for the other person. And that's what I was doing. We act like a fool, self-centered, and just overall gross. Like we don't even consider the other person's pride and ego. Not in a bad way, but like we find fault and criticize others and pick them apart in front of other people, not even thinking about how it will make them feel, let alone how the other people watching will think of us and think, wow, that person is really picking apart somebody. I don't want to be close to them because they could do it to me. So we do all this stuff, only thinking of ourselves, and yet how many times do we also think, wow, nobody cares about me. Everyone's so cliquey and judgmental. They don't want to be my friend. What's their problem? We feel bad for ourselves because no one came to talk to us at a social event, when really we should be asking ourselves, well, did you get up and try to talk to somebody else at the social event? Or are you trying to put all the blame on somebody else? Why should other people try to solve your problem and your desire for friends? That's why we have to make the first move, and that's what I had realized. But honestly, it's so difficult, and it was so difficult for me to stop thinking of myself first in social interactions because so many of us are so afraid. Social interactions are huge. Everybody knows that. If you're socially unaccepted, it does huge damage to your self-worth and your image and your idea of yourself. Like, it's really important. Relationships are huge. And that's why a lot of this is tied to fear. We come at these social interactions like protecting ourselves first because we're afraid of the other people. Like, for me, I've been so afraid of other people's judgments. I felt like it's better to just be quiet and disengage in social interactions rather than, stumble over my words or say something stupid or not be clear. And then everyone's like, oh, she's so weird. Like, I was too afraid to just be a normal person that makes mistakes than to actually engage in conversation. But I want you to listen to this quote because it is very powerful. It says, all men have fears, but the brave put down their fears to go forward, sometimes to death, but always to victory. And what if we had that mindset? What if we didn't let our fear control us? What if we set it aside, set it in its place because there is a place for that and we realize our faults and our insecurities, but we move past it? What if we did it afraid? And if you really logic your way through, okay, what if I do say something silly? It's like, well, you're not going to combust. And at some point, everyone says something silly. Oswald Chambers says that true love is willing to become destitute. And if you think of, that's such a heavy word, but are you willing to love people enough to look silly in front of them, to be destitute in your appearance in front of other people, and to just put yourself aside, put your fear aside, think of others first? Because if we're honest, this is how Jesus thinks of us. Jesus was willing to become destitute. Jesus was mocked and ridiculed and persecuted, and he loved everybody. He loved prostitutes and the Samaritan woman and people who were rejected. He didn't care what people thought. And because of that, he has obviously changed so many lives. And if you know Jesus, which we talk all about in my episode about living the supernatural life, then you'll know what I mean. So my problem was that I came at it with a fearful me first mindset. So are you willing to put yourself second? Do you want to be above fools who ask the crowd, what are you going to do for me? And really think about it, because this is a tall order, because people will leave you destitute. But we have to make this decision for ourselves, regardless of other people. And if you are willing to address social situations with an others first mindset, then here's how. First of all, our goal is to make friends and influence people. And the only way we can actually accomplish this is by changing our behavior, which starts in our minds. Because honestly, no one has your back. We should know by now that no one's going to seek you out and say, hey, you look lonely. Do you want to chat with me? I'm really nice and we'll talk all about you the whole time. No one is going to say that. And if you don't put the work in for your own success, your own relationships, your own friends, and actually put value into that, no one else will. So you're the one who's going to have to change and step out and be vulnerable first. And some people think that changing your behavior in order to make friends is manipulative. I've heard that a couple times, and I just want to work through a little bit of that. Because I think it's important. Obviously, we don't want to be manipulating people. We are not trying to put on a social mask and change who we are and pretend we're some bubbly person who's all confident and interested when we're not. This needs to be genuine. So we're not talking about use these tips to manipulate people into being your friend so you can succeed in business and social life and be successful, and then you can screw them all over once you are. This is a new way of life. This is legitimately changing who you are. And for me, it's difficult to be interested in what the everyday person talks about. But God has allowed the love he has for other people that I may not love to be revealed a little bit more to me, so that I do care about what they're doing more. And I can love them and I can take time for them because Jesus does, and they are important. Whether I think what they're saying is important or not, in fact, they are. And being manipulative in general has to do with your motive. Okay, so honestly, this entire video is about being others first minded. So our motive should be others first. And if you go at this just trying to make gains socially, it's not going to work out. And people are going to see through it. Honestly, this is just another higher calling. Jesus tells us to change all the time, right? I mean, we've read the Bible. Changing yourself to be better is not a bad thing. And it is better in general, morally speaking, to value people. It just also happens to be extremely beneficial for everybody too. So let's get into the 3 key points that are the reason why thinking of the other person first leads to social success. First of all, when dealing with other people, we need to realize and remember that we're not dealing with creatures of logic. We're dealing with creatures of emotion and pride and vanity and prejudice. So realizing that people are emotional and a lot of the emotions they feel are the same ones you feel can show us how, of course, we have to take the first step because everyone else is entering this social platform in this room full of people with the same anxiety, with the same fear. So if we all just sit back in our fear, no one's going to make the first move. And a lot of the time that happens. We're all just going to stay in our clique. That's why people have cliques, because they're afraid and they're comfortable and they don't want to move. This also means that people cannot be won over by words. Of course, you could flatter someone, and if they're like naive enough to believe you, then maybe you would have a friend, but it wouldn't be legit. So it isn't about the words. It's about how you make people feel, and being genuine and showing up and being vulnerable and being a friend first makes people feel important, which is something they like to feel, and then they'll like you. The second key point that leads us to social success is to remember that it's easy to love people if we stop trying to judge who deserves it. Because a lot of the time, especially for me, like, I'd be like, oh, I want friends. And then someone, would come into my circle who is a potential friend, and I'd be like, I don't want to be friends with them, though. Like, not that friend. Because I was judging people. I was thinking, oh, they're this or that, or I'm this or that, and they wouldn't like me, and I don't have time for what they like, and they look, I don't know. It was just a whole bunch of judgments, and it's like, instead of judging people, let's try to understand them. Because once we understand why people are the way they are, we'll realize that even though, like, I'm this and you're that, we're coming from pretty similar places. Because if we had experienced what they experienced and gone through what they did and seen everything, then we would probably be exactly like them. And this type of thinking breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness, just like Jesus. And we really need to keep in mind that you and I deserve so little credit for who we are. It's insane. Like, we didn't choose what gender we are, where our parents live, what social bracket we fall into, what class we fall into, the religion, ways of thinking that our parents taught us and exposed us to, if we were abused, if not, all that's outside of our control. So to say that, it's like, to take pride in who I am is sure, we do work towards who we are, but for the most part, it's out of our control. So to judge someone because of where they're at and compare it to where you're at is not good. And it's full of pride, and it's like not even deserving pride, because we didn't really do anything very much to get where we're at. There's a quote that goes, God does not judge a man until the end of his days, which is a really great quote, I think. But it's like, why should you and I, right? And if we stop judging people and trying to decide who deserves love or our friendship or time, then literally anyone can be your friend. And there's a lot of interesting people I've met. Like, I'm like a square. I've been a Christian my whole life. I don't do anything bad, really. I mean, compared to the world, whatever. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I'm a square. So I worked at a plywood mill, and one of my funnest, like, best friends I made there was an ex-druggie. I don't know if he was a felon. I can't remember. I think so. Tattooed, cussing, not a Christian, but it's like we were so different that we connected, because we would tell stories and like shock the other person, because it's like, wow, that reality exists on Earth. I never knew that. And it was fun. So you'll meet a lot of great people if you just allow yourself to. The third key thing to keep in mind is that showing off is unattractive, and honestly, it really shows how insecure you are. And what I mean by showing off is, like, basically, people call it a me monster, but when you do get into those circles of conversation, you kind of try to take it over. You talk about yourself, me, and it's just icky. And it really pushes people away, because you're just thinking about yourself. You're not interested in them. And the way to develop the best in a person is through encouragement and appreciation, which you cannot offer someone if you don't even take a second to think about what they're doing or say anything. Like, my 1-year-old did not want to eat some chicken the other night, even though she likes pureed chicken and occasionally eats, like, chicken. She doesn't have a whole bunch of molars right now, so I'm not sure. Whatever. she wouldn't do it. And I was like telling her, oh, no, 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 you don't get dessert and stuff. And she was crying and crying. And then finally she took a bite. And I was like, yay! And I clapped. And her sister clapped and we were like, woo, woo, woo. And then she smiled and took another one and we clapped again. And it was encouragement that got her to eat her whole plate of chicken instead of me, like, you know, like chastising her and saying, well, you should eat it and I don't know what your problem is. So if we want to connect with people, we need to be positive minded and encouraging. That way we can be there for the other person in body language and tone and demeanor and really engage and be confident standing there knowing we can talk about this person the entire conversation and I will still know who I am in Christ. My identity does not rely on this person's approval or how much I say about myself to this person. So I can listen and I can be a happy listener. And all of this is about being better for others so that we can pull them up to be better with us. Before we get into some practical habits on how to apply these 3 key points, if you found this video to be helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. So how can we change because people are in fact creatures of emotion? Well, first of all, we can come at conversations and open up conversations by starting with like, how can I get to know them? Ask questions about them or thinking through what about them might be interesting to me so that I'll actually listen and it'll be a legit cool conversation for both of us. We can also deliver potential criticisms to people as suggestions because we aren't their mommy or their boss and they don't have to listen to us. And suggestions make people feel important because you allow for them to put in their input and you show that you value their perspective and opinion. We can also appeal to nobler motives and give that person a reputation to live up to, like saying, I know you're an honest person, or I really value how you're spontaneous and transparent, or something. And that all kind of goes back to being tactful, but also pulling them up with us again to like a higher place and just being a good friend that shows that you want what's best for them in every way. Next, how can we stop trying to determine who deserves love? We kind of already touched on this, but we can accept that the only opinion of us that actually matters is that of God's because we won't be second guessing like what will people think if I reach out to this person or hang out with them, or what will this person think if they come to my house or see the way I live because they're liberal and I'm conservative. It's just like, it doesn't matter. Kindness is appreciated universally, and if we don't second guess ourselves in that scenario because we've put our feet on the solid rock of Jesus, then we'll be a lot more sturdy and strong when faced with these opportunities. And also just by becoming genuinely interested in people. Like I said, if we try to think of people the way that God does, or we see them and we might start to judge them, but then we think, well, without God, there I would be also, which is true, then we can be open to freely love them. And for me, this was my main issue, like I said, that I was not interested in what people had to say for the most part. And now I really try to think of it from like, what could I learn from this person? Because even if there's someone who I don't really aspire to be like, there's got to be something, right? Something that they could teach me or show me, even if it's kind of the reverse way of like, oh, they do that and then that happened and I don't like that, so I won't do it. Like, you're still learning from someone, even if you disagree. And there are tons of easy things to do to show people love without ourselves being vulnerable. For instance, smiling. I've been told I should smile more my whole life and I hated it. But now that I read this book and have thought about it, it's like, yeah, you're right. Because people aren't going to approach a big grumpy person. So if you're smiling, it's like, hey, be my friend from across the room. You don't have to say anything. You can also just be a good listener. Shut up, you know, that's easy to do for some of us. And also say their name and remember it and be like, oh yes. Because that goes back to making them feel important because they are important. We can praise the slightest improvement and every improvement because people are working really hard. And even if we don't struggle with the same thing, they might be really, really trying. And encouraging people is something not a lot of us do. And people are so hungry for it. Thirdly, how do we stop showing off? Again, it does go back to God's approval. I mean, if you're not trying to show off in front of a group of people, it's because you're already secure in who you are, regardless of what those people think. We can set out to not teach in a condescending way because there are instances where we may have something to say that would benefit the group, but if we say it in the wrong way, like they're stupid or they're idiots, that's really going to hit different when compared to us saying it in a very tactful, suggestive way. Like by saying, in my experience, such and such was a good idea. Or from my perspective. Or as far as I'm concerned. Keep it about yourself and your experiences and let them decide what they want to do for themselves. We can also keep in mind that we will never get into trouble by just simply saying, I could be wrong. Because we're not even saying I am wrong or admitting we're wrong. I mean, we're just acknowledging that I'm human and I've made mistakes in the past and this could be one of them, although I am not exactly convinced of that yet, and it's true. We could be wrong. We can ask other people to share their joys with us and only bring up our achievements or what we're doing when asked about it. That way we won't be taking over the conversation. We can also admit our mistakes. So many of us don't do that. We just fade out of the conversation, leave the group, leave the friendship, instead of fessing up and saying, oh crap, I made a mistake. And who doesn't? None of us should expect people to be perfect. And if they do, then it's a ridiculous person and you probably shouldn't be their friend anyways. And some of the time we are me monsters in conversations because that's how we converse. Some people don't really know how else to keep the conversation going rather than to talk about themselves. And I know a lot of us do it to show how we understand what another person is saying. If they tell us a camping trip and it was funny, then we'll be like, oh yeah, we went and did this camping trip and it was also funny. That's not exactly the same motives as a me monster, but we're still talking about ourselves. So taking some specific time, alone, to think about deeper questions than, hi, how are you? For instance, what I've come up with is what has been interesting to you lately? Or what have you learned lately? Or what's God been teaching you? Or what did you do this week? Something more specific, even something, because you know how we all get in that social flow. Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm good, good to see you, bye. Just the shallow, basically bull crap that we all say. If you say something that's just tweaked a little bit differently, I think it will, for a lot of people, get them out of that mindset of auto answers. And then you'll actually have some sort of a genuine interaction that you can build on. And I know what you're thinking. What if someone's actually wrong? What if we need to shut somebody down? Because not everyone's right. This is going to sound crazy to you, but we should never try to argue or prove the other person wrong. Here's why. A quote goes, I don't even know if it's a quote or it's just from the book or whatever, but it says, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And it's kind of true because, we've all been there when someone argues with us and we go back and forth and then finally we're factually proven wrong. We might say, oh, they were right, but we're bitter. We're angry. We resent the conversation. We don't want to talk to that person. And that, when we're that person trying to prove the other person wrong, we have pushed them away, essentially, and lost something so much more valuable than the argument because we've lost this person. This does not mean that we should just go along with what is morally wrong and factually incorrect, but we should always express our opinion tactfully and realize and respect that other people have different viewpoints and perspectives, and if they're adult, they're allowed to do so. There's a little part in the book that is all about how to argue when we are faced with someone who actually wants to have a civil conversation and we can both be tactful. And if you really want to get friends and know how to behave in social interactions, read this book, okay? But anyways, how should we argue or whatever or discuss differences? First of all, welcome the argument because you very well may be wrong and might be saved from a very bad mistake. We should distrust our initial reaction, which is usually defensiveness, and we need to control our temper. And we should seek to listen first because this will diffuse the other person's defensiveness and show them that we're having a conversation and it may be confrontational. It may have a disagreement in it, but I still respect what you have to say and I still want to seek truth instead of prove my point. We should also be honest. Look for your own areas of weakness and your own error and address them. Apologize for them. Acknowledge them up front. Even if you're 5% of the problem and they are 95%, it's still partly your fault, so say something. Promise to think over your opponent's points. Now, this is huge for me because when I first got married, like my husband, we would like be arguing and I wasn't tactful at all. But he would be like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I couldn't drop it because I would think, well, then we're never going to talk about it and it's just going to be like a huger, bigger problem and I'm going to blow up and like, we have to talk about it. So then I would like literally chase him around the house, which wasn't good. So when he said to me, I don't want to talk about this anymore right now because I'm super upset and I don't think we're getting anywhere, but I will think about it and we'll talk about it later, I was like, oh, okay. If you need space, that's fine, so long as we do get back to it. So actually saying that really helps. This last one takes so much maturity to do, but it's so very true. We should thank our opponent. Because anyone who takes time to disagree with you is interested in the same things you are, and a lot of the time, they're interested and concerned for your well-being. If we think of them as people who want to help us, then we may turn our opponents into friends, and this goes for people who aren't tactful and who do hurt our feelings, because so many of us are genuinely like trying to help somebody and say something that needs to be said, but because we're not tactful and we just say things out of hand, we hurt other people that we didn't want to hurt and we didn't mean it and we didn't mean to and we came from a good place. So we need to realize that that is also happening to us. Applying all of these habits and keeping in mind the 3 key points that lead us to social success is genuinely going to change our lives. But it can be difficult to keep on track with and to just keep in mind week to week, day to day. So if you want help with that, you can go below in the description for a free download of my social goals worksheet, which will just kind of remind you of like what we're doing here and your new way of life. Because of all these tips and the simple and single idea of approaching social interactions from a them first perspective, my social interactions have done a 180. For instance, I reached out to another mom who I go to church with and have known for a long time. I just didn't ever try to be her friend. And now like we hang out and we've become close enough that I'm not like stressing out over what do I say next? Is there going to be a long pause? Like I'm actually comfortable with her and our kids are really enjoying it, but so are we. I also met another mom at the park and our kids shared snacks and we got to chatting and she was saying how she was kind of lonely, so I decided to offer my number. Again, I took the first step. Another gal I've known for years who lives just down the street, I have made a point to reach out to and talk to, but not only that, I invited her over for a play date and for like, you know, hanging out with me, obviously. So that's finally going somewhere. And just the other week at church, a mom came up to me and started talking, and she was someone I was like kind of, you know, in that category of she seems cool, but I don't know if she would like me. I was like logicking my way out of it and saying like, I don't really know what to talk about. Anyway, she came up to talk to me and we chatted for maybe like a minute, and then the conversation was quiet and I was sitting there like, oh crap, this is awkward. But in the past I would probably just sit there and like move on or get up or like, I don't know, talk to someone else. But I was like, no, mentally, no, don't let it go. Like think of some other thing that you can ask her to get her to start talking about herself. Which I don't even know. I think I just said like, what have you done this week, I think, or how was your week? And she went on this big huge thingy, which I was interested in, lo and behold, about how they had just got a foster kid and how it was going. And I was very interested because it's a topic my husband and I have discussed. And we talked for 10 minutes or something. And it was great. And honestly, the biggest thing for me right now is obviously these relationships that are forming and flourishing. But inside of myself, as I push myself for friendships and as I push myself in conversation where I am afraid, I realize that I can do it. I can carry a conversation. I'm building my own confidence because I'm seeing that like I'm not actually a weirdo and people don't actually not like me. It was just the vibes I was giving off because I was so afraid inside of myself. Like, Personally, I've always felt inferior to other girls, or maybe not inferior, but just like different. I'm a tomboy, and I really am blunt and logical, and a lot of women, not all of them, are not that way. So I've always kind of been like, why bother? I'm weird. They won't like me. We won't connect. And I'm seeing that that isn't the case. And a lot of women, opposites attract, and it's fine. Just try, We shut ourselves down so often before we even do anything. It's ridiculous. And the thing is, you can do this too. At work, at the grocery store, picking up your kids from daycare. You don't have to be afraid, and even if you are afraid, you don't have to wait and tell yourself, well, I can't do it right now, I'm afraid. Your fear's not going to go away. You can do it afraid. You can prove yourself wrong just like I have, and my fear is much, much less. It isn't gone yet, and I don't know if it ever will be, but I'm much more confident and loose in social interactions, and you totally can get there. It's only taken me a couple weeks. And friendliness has become a rarity. Everyone is so afraid of everybody else. We're all in our own little world, and we don't want to open up. People will welcome your friendliness and kindness and your interest to them because they're starved for it. And even if you do mess up, it's like, okay, so does everyone else. And honestly, what I've noticed, because my sister, she's like, she can't be fake. I don't know if you know someone like that, but she's the sweetest person ever. And she just like doesn't play games and is herself wherever she goes. And people love her because they feel comfortable around her. They know she's not judging them because she's being weird. She's stumbling over words and being goofy and just being a normal human. So when you do mess up or whatever, if you're just weird, most people are going to relax and be weird with you and just really enjoy being able to be themselves around you. So it won't be a bad thing. And if you do these things, you will be able to make friends and influence people. You will find yourself with a support group full of people who you have found mutual interests with, and you'll be able to have easy, flowy, connective conversation like you do with your bestie right now. And the thing is, other people are going to be watching, and they're going to see you, and they're going to be eager to become your friend because all of us want friends. And if you're a good friend to other people, then the other people are going to be like, oh, I want to get to know them. They seem cool. And that's exactly how being good to people, which is what this is all about, pays off for everybody. But this can only work if you have the one trait that trumps them all, which is what we're going to be talking about in the next episode, which is teachability. If you hear all this stuff I'm saying, but you're like, not for me, or I disagree, I mean, that's fine. But at a certain point, we do need to be teachable. And if we're not willing to be, then we're really going to basically fail in life in general. If you don't want to miss that discussion, then make sure you subscribe and follow along. But thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope this information helped you, and I'm so excited to share it with you because it literally has changed my life. Thanks, guys.